details more in just a moment. But let me explain how we got to Taylor Road here today. An elderly female called 911 and said one of her family members had battered her. Deputies arrived a short time later, and during the interview learned that our suspect inside the residence that lives with her and her husband had struck her in her pacemaker, had struck her in her face around the nose area, and struck her on the side of her head. We had EMS come out, check her out. Fortunately, she's going to be sore, but she's a tough old lady. That's for sure. So after we make contact with the initial interview, learn where our suspect is. He's in the back of the house in one of the bedrooms. The mom goes and tries to encourage him to come out of the bedroom. He doesn't want to come out of the bedroom. The deputy began speaking with him and starting this dialogue with him. And at one point, the deputy moved a little closer to try to hear the suspect. And the suspect, in return, shot through the door at one of our deputies. There's no doubt that his intent on this day was to kill one of our deputies. Fortunately, by the grace of God, the deputy was shot through the arm, and at the very tip of his ballistic vest, the way our vests are designed so the deputies can maneuver, that's where they're the most vulnerable, here underneath their armpit area. The bullet hit just below the armpit area at the very edge of the ballistic vest, and it stopped the bullet from penetrating his vital organs. So we're extremely fortunate that this deputy has been released from the hospital and will make a full recovery here today. After this shooting, the other deputy who was on scene had the whereabouts to grab both family members, both elderly members of this house, and started to remove them from the house to make sure that they wouldn't be a subject to additional injury. So remove them from the house. The deputy managed to get himself out of the house and properly at that time notified our SWAT team and our negotiators to see what we could do to render a peaceful resolution during this incident. For almost 7 hours, our negotiators made over 200 telephone calls to this individual, and we did everything we could to try to garnish a peaceful resolution. At times we deployed gas inside the house, trying to make it uncomfortable, again, trying to have him peacefully exit the house and surrender. Throughout this time, as we're trying to make it uncomfortable and garnish this peaceful resolution, he was walking throughout several areas of the house, was making irrational statements, and then at one point secured himself in a laundry room. At that point, we were kind of at a stalemate. Our deputies deployed more gas into that room where he was located, and he came out the same way he was throughout this entire process, and that was holding the gun, holding this firearm that he used to shoot our deputy. The whole time during this 7 hours of negotiation, had the same firearm in the same hand. And as the deputies are asking him, pleading with him, telling him to drop the gun, he took an aggressive stance. He began to raise the firearm and move towards the deputies, leaving them with no choice than to fire his SWAT rifle that he has. And at that time, he struck the individual in the torso area 2 times. Our suspect still did not surrender. He still began to fight with deputies as they tried to secure him all the way to the ground. As they're trying to handcuff him, he was fighting the entire time. They managed to get him secure. Our SWAT medics were on scene already and immediately began rendering medical attention. He is in surgery at this time. Our deputy involved is Deputy Adriel Gonzalez, and I should say our victim deputy who was shot. He's Deputy Adriel Gonzalez. He's 33 years of age, and he's worked at the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office since 2016. Our deputy who deployed his SWAT rifle is Deputy Sankar Montut. He's 38 years old. He's been with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office since 2012. He has no prior history of being involved in a deadly force incident and has no IA history at all. Our suspect is James Allen Jackson. He's 48 years of age. He's a white male. He has no criminal history whatsoever, but he's been Baker Acted 4 times, once voluntarily, and been Marchman Act once. Marchman Act is when you're put under a Marchman Act because of your alcohol abuse. You're placed into custody for your own safety. The latest time that we had been out here at this residence was just recently, September 11th. He was engaged in some type of verbal argument with one of the neighbors, but there was nothing that warranted any criminal charges, so the case was unfounded at that time. Family members did, after this latest incident on September 11th, go to the judge to try to garnish an involuntary Baker Act for their family member, and unfortunately the judge didn't grant it at that time. The suspect is being charged with 2 counts of attempted murder on a law enforcement officer for the 2 deputies that were inside the house when he discharged his firearm, and also domestic violence, 2 counts on an elderly person. What questions can I answer? She was. Yeah, he lived with his elderly mother and father. She's the one that was the victim of the battery.
You said there was gas deployed. It sounded like there was maybe 5 to 6 shots of deployment gas. Is that correct?
Correct. I don't know how many rounds of gas were put, not just in that room towards the end as we were trying to get them to peacefully surrender, but throughout the 7 hours during these negotiations as we tried to get them to come out of the house. At one point, he even came out of the house with the firearm. Held the firearm. He was going all over the house, sat down by the computer, was making irrational statements that, did we receive the instructions from President Bush? He's got diplomatic immunity. He exited the house with the firearm. Again, there were so many times that our deputies showed just such great restraint and discipline throughout this day. I couldn't be more proud of them.
Do you feel that this man should have not been here today, that he should have been Baker Acted, they should have been off the streets, so to speak? Or?
I definitely believe that he should have been receiving more mental health help. I'm the first one out here to advocate for mental health and individuals who need help. But I want to make sure that that no one's misunderstanding what I'm saying. He may be an unhealthy person, not a bad person, but he still has to pay what he did here today.
Is he expected to make a full recovery once he's out of surgery?
I believe so. We didn't see anything life-threatening where he was shot in his torso, but certainly I'm not a medical professional. I don't want anyone to hold me to it, but we don't think that any of his injuries were life-threatening. Yes, ma'am.
Can you just speak to the skill that it takes for your deputies to come out and handle a situation like this that requires a lot of mental fortitude?
I think they do such a wonderful job, and I'm the first one out here singing their praises. I also believe that a year ago, we mandated an additional 40 hours of advanced training on individuals suffering from mental health crisis, drug-induced crisis, PTSD, and it's incidents like this that just shows that advanced training is working. They did a wonderful job here today trying to de-escalate the situation, trying to establish communications with this individual, doing everything they could, from the deputies here on the street that initially responded to the call and to the experts that came out, our SWAT operators, our negotiators, our bomb team operators that were here today. Just couldn't be more proud of them, and their training never was more shineful than what it was today. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.